So now we're going to start to look at how we can solve the problem we had in the last video, in the last section, where we could override a value that had been passed through our error checking simply by just writing to it. Now I've tidied up the country class a bit to simplify it a bit. So we've now got two methods, set area and set population. They're basically both the same. They're both return booleans, and they return false if we try and set the area to anything that's not greater than 0. Our set density method is still the same, and I've changed the set geographical values one to basically print out a simple message that says error if we try and set the population or the area to values that aren't positive. So we've got some error checking in there. If we go down to our code down here now, we can call this set geographical values, and we can pass in it a area and a population for Wales, and we can do the same for Greece, but for Greece we're overriding the area with -500, so when we run it we end up with this erroneous -500, and we want to be able to stop that. The way to do that is to do with these words public. Now, we've been writing public in front of lots of things throughout this course so far, and we haven't explained what it means. In simple terms, public means that something can be accessed from outside a class. So all these things here we've written public in front of, and that means that when we go down to our other class here, test country, then they can all be accessed because they all say they're public. If we don't want it to be public, we can just change this to private. Oops. Now, this means we cannot set these values from outside this class called country. The only things that are even visible and can be seen by the compiler from outside country are the ones with the word public in front of. These are all invisible. Now that has some consequences. If we scroll down to our code here where we're setting this value area, then you'll notice it says area has private access in country, and there's a little red thing here. This no longer compiles. We cannot override this value. Unfortunately, that has some other consequences too, and we have to do something about that, because you'll notice that we're still doing the same with the name. We're setting the name directly. Okay, well, we can do something about that. Notice that it's not complaining about set geographical values because that's public. So what can we do? Well, we can do this. Remember, we can use this .name when we're using the same name here and here. Now, if I go back down to my main code again, I can change this to and I can do the same here. Oops. And the red stuff's gone. These now compiles. Our little compiler warnings errors here have gone. We've still got this one here. That's because we're not allowed to do that anymore. Okay, we've stopped the user or any other program directly accessing the variables and messing up the values that we have controlled with our error checking. So I have to take that out now because I can't do that. The only problem is, if we look further down, we'll see that we've still got red underlining, and that's because we're also accessing these values, name, area, density. We're not doing population, but we certainly could do down here when we print them out. And again, that's because this works both ways. We're not only oops, I need to put void in there. We're not only accessing these values in here to set them, we also want to be able to read them and print them out too, and currently we cannot do that. We can't read these things because they're private. So what do we do about that? Well, what we have to do is we have to actually go away and write some methods to do this. Just as we wrote methods to set the values, we also need to write methods to get the values. So I'm going to do that now. So I've written this method, and now it begins with get, because it's returning a value. It returns the name. The name is private, but this method itself is public. This method is inside the country class, so it can see these values. It can go away and look at the private value of name, and it can return it. So if I go down the bottom here, if I go, rather than putting name, I put get name, then my compiler error disappears. And of course I can do the same with area and density, and I should do the same with population as well, but since I'm not actually using that, I won't bother. Okay, so I'm just going to put these in. Get area. Okay, so there's area and density, and I can do the same down here. If I can type. Okay, now all my compiler errors should disappear. I think we've got a few little suggestions. Using an enhanced for loop, yes, we'll skip that. Yeah, okay, well those things are not that important. If I run this now, it runs. And if I start doing things like whatever, if I try and directly access the name, for example, it won't compile because this is private. So we protected access to all our data. Now, it might seem a bit excessively big and clumsy to do this, but there's two very important reasons for this, and I'm going to explain those in the next video.